AmeriCorps says, come together. Citizens and businesses, schools and churches, come together as partners in progress to solve our problems and reach our promise. With AmeriCorps, you are building your country's future and helping to build your own. Let me ask all the AmeriCorps volunteers here to raise your hand and repeat after me. I am an AmeriCorps member.
I am an AmeriCorps member.
And I am going to get things done.
And I am going to get things done.
Yes.
Please welcome Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation, Stephanie Street.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Clinton Center. How's everybody feeling this morning? Good? Well, this is an exciting day, and thank you for joining us here in the room and online for AmeriCorps 30 Years Forward. Before we begin, I would like to take this time to pay tribute to my dear friend, an integral partner of the Clinton Center, and a recipient of AmeriCorps City Year Little Rock's Lifetime of Service Award, the late Bruce T. Moore. Bruce was Little Rock City Manager for over 21 years, and we served together as co-founders and co-chairs of the board of City Year Little Rock. Please join me for a moment of silence to honor this incredible public servant, friend, mentor to so many, and champion of AmeriCorps, Bruce T. Moore. Today, you'll hear from supporters, participants, and recipients of national service. You'll learn more about the why and the how, and then we will look forward. And all of this is possible because of President Clinton, in his first year in office, wanted to encourage a new generation of Americans to answer the call to serve their country and their community. He knew it would foster a new sense of hope and bring limitless possibilities. Just last month, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of President Clinton's signing of the National and Community Trust Act of 1993, which established the Corporation for National and Community Service and created AmeriCorps. Please make time today to stop and see a special pop-up exhibition in honor of the 30th anniversary of AmeriCorps. It's located right down the hall here near the Cabinet Room and was curated by the talented team here at the Clinton Library under the direction of my friend, Dr. Jay Barth, the director of the Clinton Library. Thank you, Jay. Since 1993, 1.3 million Americans have served through AmeriCorps, earning more than $4 billion in Siegel AmeriCorps Education Awards to help them pay for college or pay back student loans. And we will always be grateful for the visionary leadership of Eli Siegel, the founding CEO of AmeriCorps. And we are delighted that his wife, Phyllis, is here with us today. Thank you, Phyllis, for your ongoing leadership and strong support. Let me now take a moment to recognize and thank our AmeriCorps Summit partners. AmeriCorps and its CEO, Michael Smith, who you'll hear for in just a moment, the fabulous Ann Mora Conley, president of Voices for National Service, co-founder and president of With Honor Action, Ry Barcott, and More Perfect and its co-chair, Alan Casey. Join me in thanking all of these incredible people and for their great support in making today possible. All right, let's get started. And it's now my honor to invite my friend, the CEO of AmeriCorps, Michael Smith, to join me here at the podium.
Good morning, everybody. That wasn't good enough. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you, Stephanie, for that kind introduction. It is truly an honor and a privilege to be here today. I actually remember meeting with Stephanie not long after I was nominated, and she conveyed at that time just how excited that she and the president were to celebrate this milestone. And I think if everyone looks around, you can see that she is a woman of her word. So I just want to thank you again, Stephanie, and the entire team at the Clinton Foundation, and also to our friends at Voices for National Service, More Perfect, and With Honor Action for helping us to make this celebration possible. I know that we all woke up this morning in grief and prayer with the people of Lewiston, Maine, who have experienced a horrific tragedy. I am grateful, as I know all of you are, for the first responders and the law enforcement officials, but I am also grateful for the thousands of AmeriCorps members that are working across this nation to prevent gun violence in all of its forms. Today, we are all Lewiston. I have the awesome privilege to serve as the 8th CEO of AmeriCorps, at a time when our members and volunteers have met historic challenges with historic, innovative, and bold solutions. As we have seen over the past 30 years, every single time America called, AmeriCorps answered. In the moments after the September 11th attacks, AmeriCorps members ran towards the heartbreak and destruction. After Hurricane Katrina ripped through the Gulf, AmeriCorps was there and stayed long after the cameras had gone away. Over the next decade, 40,000 members helped rebuild homes and rebuild hope after the storm. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we helped over 12 million people with testing and vaccination, tutoring, and providing food for families in need, including right here at the Clinton Presidential Center. We launched Public Health AmeriCorps with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to rebuild our public health workforce. We are working with the Department of Education on the National Partnership for Student Success to recruit 250,000 new tutors, mentors, and coaches. And we are tackling climate change and environmental justice heads-on, serving as the hub for President Biden's newly launched American Climate Corps, which is meeting urgent climate needs today while building the skills for the clean energy jobs of the future. In 1994, the first class of 20,000 AmeriCorps members began their year of service. Today, 200,000 AmeriCorps members and AmeriCorps senior volunteers continue to answer America's call in all 50 states and territories and scores of native nations. President Clinton, who I know is listening, for the last 30 years, AmeriCorps has demonstrated the power of ordinary citizens to create extraordinary impact. And thanks to the foundation that the President laid, we will continue to show the world that AmeriCorps is not just a moment, it's a movement. President Clinton, who's backstage, he's met a lot of people, but I don't know if he remembers this. But we first met when I was 15 years old, just a few years ago. I look exactly the same. I was the Northeast Youth of the Year for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. 4 other regional awardees and I were recognized for our community and volunteer service. And we were invited to meet with the president in the Oval Office. I was a kid from an underserved community in Western Massachusetts, born to teen parents. We didn't have a whole lot of money, but we had love and abundance. My Boys and Girls Club, along with my church and my school, was the village that Secretary Clinton talks about, the village that raised this child. My mom told me that she sent me to my Boys and Girls Club for cheap daycare. That's what she said. She was honest. She was young. But what it quickly became was a second family, a crew of mentors, coaches, and advocates, caring adults who lifted me up and at times kept me in line. It was at my Boys and Girls Club that I first met foster grandparents and VISTA members. Volunteers and staff read with us, took us camping, taught us about Black pride and social justice, and gave us the opportunity to serve and care for our community when we were still little kids. These change makers, like so many of you, were not looking to get rich. They were not looking to get famous or even to get credit. They woke up every day with a deep belief, like President Clinton, that our neighbors' children are all of our children, and with a hope that kids like me would realize dreams bigger than they could ever imagine themselves. I have to admit that day at the White House nearly 3 decades ago is a bit of a blur. I remember Teddy Roosevelt's Peace Prize in the Roosevelt Room. I remember seeing President Clinton's cat Socks being walked on a leash. I had never seen anything like that before. I remember the president talking about President Kennedy's desk where John would hide in the cutout. But most of all, I remember meeting one of my heroes, a man from a little town called Hope, a man who had a single mom at times like me, a man who loves soul music and soul food like I do as well, a man who dedicated his life in service to kids in communities that might otherwise be left on the sidelines forever looking in. Mr. President, you show us the promise and potential of America, that where you come from doesn't limit where you can go, that even those who have a little have a lot to give, that service holds the power to transform those who are being served and those who are called to serve as well. That is the promise of America, and it is also the promise of AmeriCorps. And as we look ahead to the next 30 years, we've got some work to do together, which is why we are all here today. During the swearing-in ceremony for the first class of AmeriCorps members, the president said, "Service is a spark to rekindle the spirit of democracy in an age of uncertainty." When it is all said and done, he said, it comes down to 3 simple questions. What is right? What is wrong? And what are we going to do about it? Well, let me tell you what we're going to do about it. First, we are going to ensure that service is not a luxury for the few, but an opportunity for the many. We will continue to reduce barriers to service, increase our living allowances and other benefits, and make our funding more accessible. We will also focus on programs and partners that provide members with the skills and the training they need to build transformative careers and help them turn a year of service into a lifetime of social action and civic engagement. We will continue to demonstrate to employers, universities, and elected officials how AmeriCorps strengthens our nation, fuels the social sector, and represents America at its very best. And we will bring members together from diverse backgrounds and across differences, knowing that through service we can see each other's humanity and realize that what we have in common is stronger than the forces that try so hard to divide us. Anyone introducing President Clinton might start with his historic and well-known achievements. A Rhodes Scholar, the first Democratic president in 6 decades to be elected twice, the architect of our country's longest economic expansion, and the founder of one of the world's most effective and innovative foundations focused on global health, equity, and economic opportunity. But what everyone in this room knows and loves him for is his lifelong dedication to service. Mr. President, Dr. King used to say, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. When the president joined Boys Nation to learn how to build and spread democracy, he took the first step. When he was a student at Georgetown University and spent time as a volunteer in DC's Northeast neighborhoods, he took the first step. When he was governor and helped launch the Delta Service Corps alongside the great Billy Ann Myers to tutor children, support food pantries, and provide disaster relief across Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, he took the first step. And 30 years ago, when he signed the National and Community Service Trust Act into law, he took a powerful and lasting step to unify our national service strategy and bring existing volunteer programs under one roof like VISTA, RSVP, foster grandparents, and senior companions, to bring people together across political lines of difference, and to create pathways for those who serve to pay for college, explore new careers, and build leadership skills that last a lifetime. Thanks to the president's steps and those of Eli Siegel and Harris Wofford, who I know are looking down on us today with pride, along with 1.3 million AmeriCorps alums, you have left behind completed staircases, of dreams realized, hope restored, and faith renewed. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me with gratitude and appreciation for the 42nd President of these United States of America, William Jefferson Clinton.
Please welcome the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton, and our opening session panelists, Anne Maura Conley, Kyle Kimball, Colonel Rebecca Lang, Leroy LaPlante, and Domingo Morales.
Good morning, everybody. We have a great panel today, and I'm not going to take any time away from them, except to say that I've been out of politics a long time, more or less. And still, the day I signed the bill creating the National Service Corps in America, AmeriCorps, was one of the happiest days of my life. And and all the people on the panel are individually and collectively Exhibit A that shows that the AmeriCorps oath, a commitment to get things done, makes our differences an asset, not a liability. And everybody forgets that. Today, all that matters is, it seems to be, if you read the papers, is whether you believe the 2020 election was legitimate or not, or something like that. If you start with the end in mind, then people of good faith, more than 2/3 of the time, will agree on what they should do, eventually. And when I leave you, tomorrow morning I'm going to fly to Texas to a meeting of alums of the Presidential Leadership Program that I run with President Bush. And when we have our graduations, without exception, there's 60 people a year. He picks half, I pick half. They go through this program. The Republicans come up to me and the Democrats come up to him and thank us because they didn't know anybody like us existed on the other side of the Great Divide. That is both our great curse today in America and our great hope. And so I still love AmeriCorps, and I'm proud of what's happened. And our distinguished panelists are going to give us a personal view based on the lives they've lived about how all this happened. So, first of all, I'd like to start and just go down the line, starting with Anne Maura, maybe, and say, why did you decide to join AmeriCorps? And how does it still impact your life and career?
So I'm so old that I actually predate AmeriCorps. But I did do a year of service in the Jesuit Volunteer Corps back in the day, and it got me really excited about this idea that everybody should have the opportunity and be asked to serve. So when you created AmeriCorps, I got really excited about getting on board with that. Went to work at the agency, first for Eli Siegel and then for Harris Wofford. And I've been captivated by this idea ever since. And I work with a lot of folks in this room to help make the case for AmeriCorps, to continue the legacy that you built. I believe AmeriCorps is a legacy of love and hope and action, and that's what we need more than ever. So thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity to work on AmeriCorps and with AmeriCorps for all these years.
We worked a lot together over the years to support City Year, which was basically in existence when I ran for president. And I went to a meeting. I still have the first T-shirt I got at a city year meeting in 1992, when all these kids were saying, well, this seemed like it was a better deal than going to jail. And it was amazing. And I walked out of the meeting, I said, that's what we have to do. I had been interested for some time in national service because it was a part of this Democratic Leadership Council I had worked with. But I never saw it in action until I sat at a city year meeting. And it was, and maybe still is, the largest of our affiliates, but that's how we met 100 years ago. J.R.
Well, good morning, Mr. President. And first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to be here. It's such an honor to be on this distinguished panel. But I was born and raised on the Cheyenne River Sioux Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And historically, our reservations have been disinvested, and we've suffered through years and years of bad public policy. And so when I was a law student in 2009, my good friend Cheryl Hanna, shout out to Cheryl, who ran our Access to Justice program for our state bar in South Dakota, she asked me this simple question. She said, JR, what do you want to do as a lawyer? And I just responded quite simply, I want to make a difference in Indian country. And I don't know where that came from, Mr. President, but I think it came from my parents. They instilled inside of me the importance of public service. My mother was a food service worker. My father was a heating mechanic for the Bureau of Indian Affairs on the reservation. And I learned from them the importance of public service. So when I received this opportunity to join AmeriCorps, I jumped at it, and it's changed my life and put me on a career trajectory that at the time I didn't realize I was gonna do. And so anybody who knows me today, that I work with, know that I'm always trying to get things done, push things a little harder when I see challenges, and I think I get that from my parents and also from my time at AmeriCorps. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you for having us, and thanks for the invitation. Also born and raised in the great state of South Dakota. You often don't see there you go, there's a few more. Sir, when I was 17, my parents said, if you want to go to college, that's great, but you're on your own. And because they knew that we'd appreciate it more if we figured it out ourselves. And so I didn't know what I was going to do. I was on a couch with my mom, 1995, watching your State of the Union address. And when I heard you say the words, 20,000 young Americans right now are serving their country and earning money to go to college. And that was my aha moment. And I knew right then that's what I was going to do. There was no doubt in my mind. This was also the time before the internet as we know it today. And so I drove to the library. I pulled a postcard from a bulletin board and I sent it in to Washington, D.C. in hopes that something would happen. And the most incredible life-changing event happened. And 9 months later, I drove up to Lowry Air Force Base, which had recently been bracked or closed. And I lived in airman dorms, which is a full circle we'll talk about later, and pursued to have the most life-changing year and put me on a launch pad of service that I am eternally grateful for.
So my AmeriCorps experience, I can remember it very clearly. So I was at Harvard in my, I first heard about it in essentially my freshman year. I was part of Harvard Students for Clinton, and we were knocking on doors in New Hampshire before the New Hampshire primary, the comeback kid primary. And so I first heard about national service, not necessarily AmeriCorps, in a speech in a high school gym. Bill and Hillary were there. It was right before the New Hampshire primary. And so that's really something, the first time that I had sort of implanted in my mind this idea, this is something that I wanted to do, that I really believed in. In 1994, well, I guess really 1994, I actually applied and took a year off from Harvard to do AmeriCorps. And I can only describe, if anyone has ever had the feeling of being called to doing something, and essentially the moment for me to being called to the AmeriCorps was I was in the Office of Career Services. I was looking through some things. I was very sort of lost academically and professionally at the time. I was really looking for some answers in these job listings, and they were on paper at the time, right? This is 1993. And I saw this listing for an AmeriCorps program that was being started in Birmingham, Alabama, for Birmingham AIDS Outreach, which is essentially an organization that was they were starting an AmeriCorps program to provide in-home hospice care for end-stage AIDS patients at the time. And I'll talk a little bit later about sort of why that came about, but that is essentially my experience. And I would say that there's really not a day goes by in those 29 since years that my experiences in Birmingham and in AmeriCorps have not been a part of my professional and personal journey. I think about those experiences every day. I'm still friends with a lot of the people that I did the program with. We've been through a lot together through the 29 years. In addition to all the patients we lost, we have been together through the years as we've lost parents, as we've gotten married, lost brothers and sisters, and through all the stages of life that have happened in 29 years. So it was a truly transformative experience for me.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you everyone in this room for your service. I grew up in New York City. I found out about AmeriCorps a long time after you. But
he just said that I'm old. That's what he actually said. Yes.
Said 1993. I'm like, woo.
Again.
So I grew up in New York City. I was raised in public housing, and immediately after high school, I jumped straight into the workforce because my family was living in poverty and I had to pay bills, I had to put food on the table. And I worked a lot of dead-end jobs, and I got to a point where I was looking for purpose, so I quit the job I had, and I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. And I just didn't know what the purpose for me being on this earth was. And then one day I walked into my building, and there was a flyer on the elevator door, and it was a picture of young adults in an AmeriCorps uniform that looked just like me. And on the flyer it said, are you 18 to 24? Do you have a diploma? Do you want to make a difference in your community? And it was that moment when I thought, this is for me. Especially where I come from, those qualifications that seem so minimal and so easy to achieve. In my building, I was one of few that were able to meet those qualifications. So I thought this was a sign for me, and I kind of went into an orientation where they started teaching me about sustainability, and that's when I was, like, my eyes were open and I realized that we were living in an unsustainable condition. We were living in poverty, but it was built that way, and AmeriCorps was my first way to actually make a difference and change the systems that I grew up just ignoring in life. But yeah.
Yeah, when you made that crack about age difference, I thought, we might subtitle this session, The Stone Age Meets Hip Hop or something.
Does that make me the Stone Age?
That would be me. JR, let's talk a little bit. I don't know if any of you have ever, who aren't from Indian country, have ever been on a reservation. But I think that Hillary and I have visited more Native American communities than anybody ever had. And I grew up fascinated with this. I used to go to the local library in my little town in Arkansas, and I read every single book that was in the library about Indian tribes and Indian leaders, and I just, that for all I know, a lot of it was not accurate now, but I just acquired a hunger, and I couldn't believe that the people that were here before all the rest of us who have some immigrant heritage, that what had happened. So your initiative is called Wakini, right?
Yes, sir.
So tell them what Wikini means and how has AmeriCorps become kind of an on-ramp for other opportunities, the young people you tried to help, education, economic opportunities, and other things. How did it work, actually?
Yeah, Mr. President, I appreciate you acknowledging our Wokini initiative in South Dakota, and the word Wokini is a Lakota word that is roughly translated begin again, a new beginning. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do at South Dakota State University is stop this cycle of starting over and over and over again when it comes to Indian education initiatives. Over the years, Indian education has been recycled, and a lot of old models and a lot of old initiatives have been recycled, and yet we still continue to see the daunting statistics on high school graduation rates, college access, and so forth. And so with the Wokini initiative, not unlike the AmeriCorps program, what we're trying to do is work with our students not from a place of deficit, but from a place of strength. And what I always tell young people is that you have everything that you need inherently to be successful in life. And all we're here to do is to support you, to provide you with a holistic framework of services and support. First of all, we got to get you to campus, and then once we get you to campus, we want to surround you with all of the success advising and the services necessary to help you succeed. And we just don't want you to succeed. We need you to succeed, because if you succeed, then you can go back to your community and you can change your community. You can be a change agent. You can change and make a difference. And so like AmeriCorps, I think Wokini is one of those models where we are trying to create pathways for Native American youth from the reservation to our campus where they can achieve their dream. And we're signing up dreamers every day, and that's what we're looking for.
Colonel, you made a career in the Air Force, and you're from South Dakota, as you said, but you went to school in Colorado, but not to the Air Force Academy.
Yes, sir.
And she went to the University of Colorado, which is now famous as having the most interesting football team in America. And it's been a long dry spell for them, so I'm happy for them. But what's the connection? How did you go from AmeriCorps into the military? Why did you decide to make a career of it? And tell them about your command now in cybersecurity a little bit.
You bet, yes, sir. So after my year in the AmeriCorps, so I was at the National Civilian Community Corps, the Denver campus, and when I was done, I knew there was more, and I knew that I had the perfect opportunity and launchpad to continue that. So I drove up Highway 36 to Boulder, Colorado, and I registered for classes. I paid the first half of my first bill with my education award, and I could not have gotten my foot in the door without that education award. I signed up for ROTC. I didn't have a scholarship, of course, but I knew service had taken care of me as a young 18-year-old out of high school, and I knew it would continue to do so. And I was right. And so I think the connection between the two is just the shared belief in the power of service and knowing that your nation needs you and knowing in your soul that you can deliver. And so when it comes to what is similar, there's so much. I traded my gray t-shirt with the big A on it for a brown t-shirt. I traded the black utility uniform for a camouflage uniform, traded black steel boots for black steel boots, steel toe boots. But there is so much that's similar. And I will offer to you, sir, that is proof that service as a whole is the equalizer in our nation. You can show up as an AmeriCorps, whether you show up to an AmeriCorps program, show up to the military, just the shirt on your back. That's all you need. And your nation, you are shaking the hand of your nation because you want to serve and you want to give back. And it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter what you look like, but you are raising your hand and showing that you are willing to step forward for your nation and and your nation takes it from there. Thank you. When it comes to my current command, I'm the commander of the 659th ISR Group, Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance Group at Fort Meade. I command 1,100 airmen, 5 time zones that are in the cyberspace domain, both securing networks and infiltrating others. And I'm going to have to stop there just for my own future career sake. But again, like the parallels between the airmen that I command and the incredible Corps members that I served with, there are far more similarities. In fact, I could barely, it would be tough for me to name you a difference that matters between the two. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. I actually wrote a book with James Patterson about this cybersecurity thing. It's really a big deal what she's doing. A lot of things can go haywire. Kyle, so when you did AIDS outreach in Birmingham, did a lot of people look at you like you were crazy? I mean, was the culture hostile to it? I mean, tell us about what you learned and how you learned to deal with different kinds of people when you were in Alabama.
Sure. So I completely agree about the AmeriCorps experience being a great equalizer. It was about 24 of us who were part of the program. We were trained as home healthcare workers, providing in-home hospice care. The public policy problem that they were trying to address with this grant was, at the time, this is 1994, HIV and AIDS were very different than they are today. And University of Alabama Birmingham was a leading center at the time for what is now known as a lot of the making HIV more manageable. So a lot of people moved to Birmingham to try to be part of the healthcare ecosystem that was happening at University of Alabama Birmingham. But a lot of them had insurance that had run out or were not willing to pay for the experimental treatments. And so they were sort of just stuck in Birmingham with very little access to health care, no insurance, and they were often living with families. And so the families really needed help providing in-stage care. And so that was the public policy problem they were trying to solve. In terms of the people, it was, obviously it was very different than Harvard. The 24 of us that came together were from all different walks of life. They trained us, and I think the idea around it just didn't really even matter because we were so focused on the goal and the mission of what we were trying to do that level of connectedness around this mission, we were all there by choice, focused on this mission, brought us together and really bridged a lot of the differences. And the differences didn't even matter. We were from all different walks of life, different shades, different sexualities, different income levels, education levels, geographic backgrounds. I didn't love peach ice cream, and now I love it. As an example, as a superficial example. But the idea was that I became immersed in the city of Alabama and the people, and was riding my bike, taking care of people and moving around the city in public housing in beautiful homes, all of whom at the end of the day just needed someone, either relief, they needed someone to talk to, they needed someone to change their bandages, go get medicine, give them a bath, whatever it was. And at the end of the day, you were just there. We were all surrounded by that common goal. We were all also came together, and I'll end by this, by saying an incredible amount of grief was experienced in that 1,700 hours that I was there, that I served. But it wasn't just limited to those 1,700 hours. It was a year-long experience where we really had to come together to support each other because we were all going through a really tough experience. And what we were dealing with when we go into someone's home, and what you find when you go into someone's home when they are at the end of life, it brought us together in a way that's still incredibly remarkable. So to answer your question, the differences evaporated instantly.
For those of you who aren't old enough to remember before the development of the antiretroviral medicine, dealing with AIDS was a nightmare. And all of us of a certain age probably lost friends. We had an amazing situation here in Little Rock where the chairman of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party were gay men and good people who got along, worked together, did things together. The Democrat was a lawyer who had worked in the Attorney General's office before I took office and got AIDS and died with a horrible case of Kaposi syndrome. And I'll never forget standing in his hospital room, watching him waste away. So the people who did this work when there was no hope on the other end were really heroic. And when we dedicated the National AIDS Memorial in San Francisco, one of the honorees was a woman that grew up in my little hometown and 50 miles west of here, who was so disgusted at she was a straight, deeply religious white woman who was furious at the way people with AIDS were treated. And she started, and literally, you can't imagine, when people were dying of AIDS, most people wouldn't bury them. They were scared, and then they had to have cremations. And so she was in a hospital once to see someone else and was a guy dying, waiting for his mother to come see him. And the nurse said, "The mother's not coming. Nobody comes to see them." So she went in and held his hand till he died and then buried him in her family cemetery and wound up becoming famous because she would bury people with AIDS. You just can't imagine what it was like. So the fact that he did that and went to Birmingham to do that, it shows you that if people just keep scratching, they'll find their common humanity and wind up doing the right thing. But I'm very grateful. So Domingo, how'd you get interested in composting? And wait a minute, and how did you become a leader? How did it help you develop your leadership skills?
So I like the comparison you made to service in the Army. I wanted to be in the Army. That was my original, I wanted to go to the Army. But as a kid, I made a stupid decision and I got a tattoo on my neck. And you can't be in the Army if your tattoo shows outside of your uniform. So for me, AmeriCorps was the Army I was able to get into and like fight for the people where I was, right? A civilian Army. And on top of that, I was a germaphobe. So when I applied for this program, I wanted to go into the energy sector. I wanted to do energy audits. I wanted to build solar panels. And they said, no, with all of the job experience you have with the carpentry, with the electrical, with the plumbing, you should go to the farm team. And I'm like, can't go on the farm team because if I step on the farm, I might die. And they're like, no, you're gonna go on the farm team. So they forced me on the farm team. And I'm like, all right, this is real. I'm on a farm. I'm gonna die any minute now. I was counting the microbes. But I fell in love with the physical aspect of farming in the field. But I got tired of pulling the same weeds. I got tired of planting tomatoes and halfway through the season, it would get rot. It would start turning yellow. So I started to actually learn about the things I was afraid of the most, the microbes, the FBI, fungus, bacteria, and insects. And I started to learn about the good ones, the ones that actually make it so that the nutrients that come into the food is, because there's a mycelial network of fungus that's working with bacteria to cycle nutrients to get it to the plant so we can eat it. And I fell in love with that biology and that chemical process. And I started to love the germs that I was so afraid of. And it changed me. So I went from a guy who had 4 pairs of gloves on to a guy who was just eating random things off the field. And that's really how I fell in love with composting. It was, we were farming and we were stealing nutrients. And we're a superfood country where our food comes from all over the world. And we're stealing nutrients from the planet, but we're not regenerating the soil that we're stealing from. So composting was the first, it was with Green City Force, and they were feeding the community, so they were growing food for the public housing residents and giving it to them for free. But we were growing in raised beds because in the city, there may be lead, there may be arsenic, and these raised beds have limited amount of nutrients and resources. So I fell in love with the process of recycling the farm waste, taking residential food scraps, and rebuilding the soil, and I started to see the effect of that compost. And I landed on the Red Hook compost site, which is the largest compost site in the US that didn't use any fossil fuels. And what that meant was, it was about 2,000 people all year round that were constantly shoveling compost and working with dirt and germs. And from there, I kind of took a life of its own. I fell in love with composting. I got a job at the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and if it wasn't for my AmeriCorps service, I would have never got the job because the qualifications were a college degree and a driver's license. And in New York City, you do not need a driver's license. You can go anywhere without a driver's license because of the public transportation. And as I said, right after high school, I went into the workforce. I didn't have a college degree. So my AmeriCorps service, that experience I had at this compost site, made me the best candidate for that job when I applied for it. And immediately, 7 months after the program, and I graduated early, which a lot of my peers were really angry about because they were still serving. It was 1 week I was on their team, on the AmeriCorps team, and the next week I was their supervisor at this composting site. So I immediately jumped into training the next generation of young adults, training my peers, and working with Green City Force over the years. And then when COVID happened, the city shut down its composting initiatives, and I took that as a challenge. The public housing community was always left out of the citywide composting, so I decided to build Compost Power, my own organization, to bring composting into the public housing communities to partner with the farms. And I hired the Green City Force graduates to actually do that work. And through composting, I can teach them carpentry, plumbing, electrical, landscape design. It's in the center of everything, and that's what I love about it. I'm a scatterbrain, and on a compost site, you kind of have to be a scatterbrain.
I love that. And I think one of the points that ought to be made is, as we try to make cities more sustainable and resilient, urban agriculture is a really very important part of our future. So by doing something ancient, you became very modern. We all think everything is new. Basically, we're just recycling the same old stuff, including our politics. But anyway. So, Ann Mora, what do all these stories tell us about what's going to happen in the next 30 years to AmeriCorps? 60 years on, when there'll be other people sitting on stages like this, what will the next chapter look like?
Well, first of all, I don't like following Domingo, so thanks for that. Look, I think that you've just heard 4 stories of the nearly 1.3 million stories of people out there who have been transformed and they're in their own lives and have transformed other people's lives. There's a bunch in the room, AmeriCorps members here today, and AmeriCorps alums here today. And I think, I really meant what I said when I say I believe AmeriCorps is love and hope in action. And there has never been a moment in our country and our world where it's needed more than today. And if you think about the multiplier effect of their stories, the people they've touched through their service, the humanity that they've brought to their work, and you multiply that by 1.3 million people and the many millions of people that they've touched, this is a movement, right? And it can and should only grow from here. So my hope for AmeriCorps for the next 30 years is that it continues to grow, that we continue to make it better, that we continue to really hold ourselves accountable to making sure everybody can do AmeriCorps, everybody has equitable access. But I think it has the potential to transform even our politics, because as folks get exposed to each other, they get more proximate, they learn from each other's experiences, that just transforms their worldview. And I think you would all agree, I did through my year of service, I was a completely different person at the end of it. And I think that slow, steady, keep at it. I was at CGI this year. Thank you for having me there. And the theme was keep going. And I think in moments like this in the country and the world, it's easy to sort of say, I can't deal, right? There's just so much bad stuff going on out there. But you have to look for the helpers, as Mr. Rogers said, and you have to keep going. And I hope AmeriCorps not only keeps going, but keeps going powerfully and with all the passion and humanity that these folks have shared with us today. I feel like this has the potential to really change the world in big ways. And it already has, but in even bigger ways in the next 30 years.
In a big complicated country like ours and in a big complicated world, most of us get our information by indirection through filters. And most of us have to only imagine what other people are going through because we can't go through it. But not every American can visit an Indian reservation. But we have to keep finding ways to do this. This works, and it's basically the only thing that does work. There's a political scientist who wrote an amazing little book last year named McRaney. It's called How Minds Change. And it's a fascinating book. It basically says, you don't change other people. They change themselves based on what they see, observe, and respond to. And so it's not very effective to do what, if you want change, to do what we do now, which is tell everybody who disagrees with us how stupid they are and clueless and not human. What works is people showing a minimal amount of respect and concern for one another, and then explaining, if you want somebody to change their position, what the human consequences of the current conditions are, and ask if they really find that acceptable, and if not, how can we change it? And I think that you see this a little bit in the Middle East today. I don't want to get into that now because we don't have time, but if you go to a Native American reservation, the temptation is to say, well, you're a smart young woman, you're a smart young man, get the hell out of here. Right? I mean, if you'd be in a three-piece suit driving a foreign car if you had decided you wanted to live somewhere else and do something else and make more money. It would have been a totally defensible decision. But a central part of America's culture is contained in the lives of the first Americans who are still living together. So I think, for me, looking at it from 30,000 feet now, after all these decades, basically AmeriCorps is direct experience. It's unfiltered encounters. It's unavoidable dealing with difficulty. And I'm listening to all of you say that. So, Colonel, what do you think should happen the next 30 years to this program to make it more available and to make it more relevant?
I have a lot of thoughts. For the sake of time, when it comes to answer the question of what to do to make it more available, I have this vision, whether you are Times Square or in Aberdeen, South Dakota, that you walk into a recruiting center and you can join the Air Force, you can join the Army, or you can join AmeriCorps, or you can join, thank you, or you can join the Peace Corps. I think it is one of the most simple things that we could do to just expand the shared knowledge of the various service programs that are available. It seems pretty simple. I know those are famous last words, but I think when it comes to just providing multiple opportunities, I love what you said about the civilian army. Yes, absolutely. But I believe every American is wired to serve. I truly believe this. It's in the DNA of our country. You know, whether you look at the volunteer force, you look at the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 40s, look at the Peace Corps, you look at the AmeriCorps programs, like that's our country's DNA of service. And there's so much more than what I said. But every individual, like you walk into a school, you walk into a fire station, you walk into a police station, you walk into a nursing home, those are Americans that are serving. And so it's not a foreign concept, but it's just a matter of how do we take deliberate action to make sure Americans know all the opportunities that are out there. I've walked into a recruiting station. I had to fight and go get that postcard at the library after I heard your State of the Union address to figure that out. Again, it's easier now because of the internet, but of my many visions for the future of national service, just giving Americans a one-stop opportunity to learn about all of the opportunities would be my first step.
That's a good idea. I guess I ought to point out that you know, every time we propose something like this, they say, oh, it's too much, let's stop. But, you know, the President Biden got this funding for the Climate Corps into its most recent legislation, and yet it hasn't been fully funded. Everybody thinks it costs too much money, but the multiplier is staggering. That is, you know, whatever, every place that, even when I was president, we had enormous evidence that the AmeriCorps volunteers who are working for very modest amounts of money got 2 or more other people just to come off the street and help just because they were there doing it, and it was magnetic to people. And so I think that if you're right, and I think you are, then we have to start thinking about how we're going to define that and how we're going to overcome the arguments that we somehow can't afford it, when in fact it may be the least expensive thing we can do to knit the country back together again. So what do you think about the next 30 years?
I think that's a great idea. I also think I probably would take it one step further. If somebody said to me, would you please join my movement to make AmeriCorps mandatory, I would sign up. I think it's something that fundamentally rewires the brain, and I think I agree that we are a country that there are plenty of opportunities for people to serve, plenty of opportunities for AmeriCorps to have an impact, and the way that would be a great way to scale AmeriCorps. Having said that, I understand people don't like the word mandatory, so the way that I would probably settle in on an answer is making it strongly incentivized. And I said this earlier too, we were talking about this as a group, creating AmeriCorps as like a gateway that people will be strongly incentivized to go through at a certain period of their life, where it's a precursor to jobs, it's a precursor to financial aid, it's a precursor to you name it, but it's becomes culturally something that you go through as part of, in many ways, the way that a gap year is part of the European culture of what people do when they graduate from high school. So putting AmeriCorps in that light, that it is something that we strongly encourage people to do. The second thing I probably would like to see is, and this is something I'm going to take away from my own leadership practice and management practice, is I think those of us in the meantime who are out hiring people, managing teams, managing organizations, running businesses, should make a greater effort, and I'm speaking about myself, of hiring and looking for AmeriCorps people. Because that in and of itself will create a culture over time where people will see that AmeriCorps is maybe something that got them their job. And that will something that will seep into the professional culture. So I'm sort of pledging today that that is something that I will do, and I think that means looking for AmeriCorps volunteers when you're looking through resumes. It means posting your jobs with AmeriCorps. And I'm not sure if there's a job board for alumni to be posting jobs. If there's not, maybe I'll help you work on that. But something like that. So we incorporate it into the alumni culture of AmeriCorps, and that's my pledge in terms of my leadership practice. But I think that's setting the stage for making it something, and I'd really like to see in 30 years AmeriCorps be something that people feel compelled to pass through as a stage in their life.
Yeah, I think we have a common theme. I think it should be 1 year of high school where you're serving in AmeriCorps while you're doing high school. And if not high school, then a gap year that when seen on a resume, employees are like, whoa, you did AmeriCorps during your gap year? Like something to emphasize how special and important it is. And I think if we make it part of tradition in America where our young adults have to serve in AmeriCorps, I know they hate mandatory, but it will also reduce the amount of college degrees that are wasted. Because I know a lot of people that served in AmeriCorps and had a complete 180 and went in a different field and had to learn new things because they realized that wasn't their passion. They didn't want to study what they studied. So I think it would save us a lot of money because we'd actually have educations that are useful because they're passionate about what they're learning because of AmeriCorps. And yeah, I think making it a tradition. It should be traditional. Like it's a tradition to serve in the Army. It's a tradition for people who have police officers in their family to be a police officer. I plan to have my kids join AmeriCorps or Climate Corps. Yeah.
So may I add one thing to that? I think a segue is, wouldn't it be amazing to live in America where somebody says, where did you serve? And I could say Iraq, Afghanistan, Native American reservation in South Dakota, city year in Little Rock, or like every example like of the alumni that we have in here, like that would be, that is my dream, that we will get to the point where it is just a natural, it's a common question, and there are so many ways to answer that question.
Thank you. I just want to make a couple of quick points. First of all, way back in 1987, I was on a Carnegie Council commission that I co-chaired with the then Republican governor of New Jersey, Tom Kean, who was a very close friend of mine, and I thought, and was a great governor. And one of the things we recommended, it was on middle school education, was that every curriculum of every public school in America should include a certain block of time for community service. Chelsea went to a Quaker high school in Sidwell Friends in Washington, where it was part of the curriculum. Everybody did it. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, Robert Kennedy's daughter, when she was Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, got the legislature to pass a community service requirement for high school students, and it was the first state in the country to do it, and I think it was the last state in the country to do it. So we need to start thinking about this, about how it can be shaping. Second point I wanted to make is that Alexis de Tocqueville in the 1830s, when you talked about should it be mandatory or not, Alexis de Tocqueville came here and wrote his famous book, Democracy in America. But one of his interesting observations was that the difference between America and the older countries of Europe is when the citizens were unhappy in Europe, they griped about the state and tried to get them to change policy. He said the Americans do that for 2 or 3 days, and then they organize some community group and fix the problem. And that's what he said in the 1830s. And the final thing I want to say is a couple days ago, the longest serving Senate aide in American history, a man named Bertie Bowman, died at 92. When I was a green kid from Arkansas who had to have a job to avoid, to stay in school in Washington, when my stepfather got desperately ill, I got a job as a clerk on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee working under the supervision of Bertie Bowman. He was a black guy from South Carolina who grew up in a family with 12 kids. His mother died young. His father and his stepmother had to organize the eating and the working and everything else for 12 kids. They didn't have any money. He heard a candidate for Congress say, "You can call me anytime if I win," in a speech. And this little black guy goes up to this white Southern politician and says, "Does that include me?" He said, "Sure." He never thought he'd hear from him. He went home, threw what little belongings he had in a pillowcase, made his way to Washington, D.C., showed up at the guy's office, and the guy paid him out of his own pocket to clean the streets of the steps of the Capitol for a few weeks, till he finally found a job. He slept outside. He couldn't do anything. Then he gets a job. Then, umpty-dump years later, I'm working for him and taking him everywhere I can because I was so impressed with him. Hillary gets to be Secretary of State. He's there at the Senate committee overseeing it. And he lived to be 92, and he worked till he was 90 years old. They let him stay because he was so alert, so that he spent a lifetime in service. It made him young. He grew up with nothing, and so he was always grateful for just a roof over his head and a way to make a living and get his kids an education. But we need to think of that. We think of the grieving families in Maine today. I grew up in gun country. I had a 22 when I was 10 years old, a .410 shotgun when I was 14. I was taught gun safety, and I passed the assault weapons ban, not by telling all the people that thought I was, you know how they are. I said, look, all I'm doing is asking for your help. I know you're out here in the country and you want to hurt and go to sports student conversation, all this stuff. But you have no idea what's like, life is like on the streets in America at the time, dominated by gangs and drugs. I said, these kids need your help. They're our kids too. And it wouldn't do you any harm to have a complete background check, to give up these weapons of war that you don't need for anything. And I went through all this stuff and I said, please help us. And we passed it. But I don't want to gild the lily here. Change is not easy. 15 people at least lost their whole careers because they laid down their careers to save kids' lives on the streets. But the point is, you have to make a direct connection, and you can't do it by telling people how ugly you are. You have to do it by digging down there and finding where people live. And so I can't thank you enough, all of you, for what you're doing and what you have done. But I was looking at all of you today thinking, God, if 100% of Americans, talk like they do, thought like they do, work like they do, does anybody seriously believe we'd be dealing with half the problems we're dealing with today? No. So everything is here that we need to solve our problems and seize our opportunities. And that's the gamble I was making 30 years ago with AmeriCorps. And I looked at you and realized, we should have done it even more. And I think we can now. So let's give them a big hand. They were great. Thank you.
Please welcome AmeriCorps alum, Jada Zuniga.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jada Zuniga, and it's an honor to be here today. I have to say, I fully agree with alumni and President Clinton, who all shared their amazing stories. Once again, thank you to all the panelists for sharing your stories. It's inevitable that AmeriCorps really changes lives, including my own. Hearing from the panel, it's clear that AmeriCorps has opened many doors of opportunity, even sometimes doors that you didn't even know were an option. Just 2 months ago, I started a full-time job as a patient care technician, helping people who are navigating the challenging world of kidney care and dialysis. It's an experience that can sometimes make patients feel alone or isolated, as their care often depends on in-center hemodialysis for several hours. One of the most rewarding parts of my job is presenting myself with patients, knowing that I can put a smile on their face at the end of the day. School and technical training might prepare you for a day of a healthcare job, but it is real-world experience that helps you see the human side of this industry, as well as other jobs. And for that, I am extremely thankful for my service with AmeriCorps. I served in the first cohort of Public Health AmeriCorps, and as Mr. Smith had mentioned earlier, it's a historic partnership with the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, which fill in the gaps of our public health workforce by advancing more equitable outcomes for underserved communities and create pathways to public health careers for people of all backgrounds, especially those who are underrepresented in the field. It may come to a surprise to many, but Public Health AmeriCorps welcomes individuals as young as 18 years old, without the prerequisite of a college degree or prior experience, or any experience in public health. Throughout my service year, I witnessed firsthand the program's genuine appreciation for lived experiences, valuing them as much, or if not even more, than formal degrees and certifications. This genuine appreciation, among many others, is what piqued my interest and motivated me to seize the opportunity to learn and grow while serving in the local community. During my service year as an AmeriCorps member, I had the privilege of serving in the esteemed Pima County Health Department in Tucson, Arizona. It's a little warm over there, so I'm enjoying the weather here in Arkansas. I had the privilege of discovering the program through Arizona Serve, an AmeriCorps program affiliated with the Prescott College. In my service, I played a pivotal role in fostering internal collaborations by establishing meaningful partnerships with local communities surrounding Tucson. Additionally, I actively contributed to the overarching mission of promoting a healthier workforce through implementation of award-winning initiatives that focused on creating a positive and conducive work environment. During my time here, I gained a profound understanding. Embracing challenges and seizing opportunities, seizing the opportunities can yield unexpected yet highly rewarding outcomes, such as everlasting friendships and inevitable networking. This experience enabled me to discern not only my strengths, but also my weaknesses. I think it's very important, to understand that weaknesses can also be highly rewarding as much as we don't want to face them. Offering invaluable insights that have significantly contributed to my personal and professional development. I not only fulfilled my designated responsibilities, but I also seized every opportunity given by Arizona Serve, actively engaging in local communities and contributing meaningfulness to narrative as understanding significance of community involvement. AmeriCorps played a fundamental role in shaping my educational journey, paving the way for my pursuit of becoming a public health nurse. The education award I received has been instrumental, providing essential support to my academic endeavors. With this foundation, I am equipped to serve and make meaningful impact on the community, a goal that is deeply rooted in my passion and for public health, and to continue the legacy that my late grandpa created when he immigrated here in 1984. I trust that my narrative, as long as those shared by the panelists before and after me, will inspire and guide the next generation, paving the way for the future of their successes. So before I part today, I want to say thank you to President Clinton for your vision and courage to create an agency that supports young people like me to chase their dreams while improving our communities. To AmeriCorps for your support and partnership with local schools and universities, making opportunities more accessible, as well as organizations like Pima County Health Department, who are doing life-saving work. And of course, to my family and friends, as someone once told me, once a champion, always a champion. Thank you.